He thought the fire had taken everything, his love, his peace, his reason to live. But when she returned from the ashes, holding the child he never knew existed, the truth waiting behind her eyes was darker than death itself. The city of Milan slept under a bruised sky, its lights dimmed by the hour before dawn, that fragile time when even devils rest. Inside a penthouse overlooking the quiet streets, Adrian Valente sat alone in his study, the glow of a single desk lamp cutting through the darkness. Stacks of ledgers, half-drained whiskey, and a pistol lay before him, symbols of power, wealth, and war. The man who once commanded fear across Europe now stared at nothing, lost in a silence so deep it almost screamed. His empire was thriving, yet his heart hadn't known peace in months, 7 months to be exact, since she'd walked out. Since Liana Valente vanished from his world like smoke, he told himself he didn't care, that the divorce was necessary, that love was just another weakness, one he could no longer afford. But every night when the city slept, her ghost came knocking. In the sound of rain, in the perfume that lingered on his shirts, in the ache that never quite left. And tonight, that ache felt heavier than usual. He leaned back in his chair, eyes closing, when his phone vibrated sharply against the wood. He frowned. No one dared call him at this hour. His men knew better. His enemies wouldn't dare. He checked the screen. An unknown number. Hospital code. Something inside him stilled. He answered, voice low and edged with command. "Valente." The voice on the other end trembled. "Sir, I'm calling from San Mateo Hospital." Hospitals meant blood. Or betrayal. Nothing else in his world. He straightened, heartbeat slow but loud in his ears. "What is it?" The nurse hesitated. "A woman was brought in a few hours ago. She gave birth before collapsing." Adrian's brows knit. "You've got the wrong number." "No, sir," the nurse said softly. "She listed you as the father." The silence after that was deafening. The whiskey glass slipped from his hand, shattering on marble. His chest tightened like someone had pressed a blade beneath his ribs. "What did you say?" "She named you as the father, Mr. Adrian Valente." For a moment he couldn't breathe. There were many names in his world. Allies, enemies, women who whispered his name in fear or worship. But only one woman had ever spoken it with love. "Her name?" he asked, his voice rough. The answer came like a ghost returning to life. Liana Valente. His throat closed. The room spun. His pulse hammered like gunfire in his ears. That name had been buried under 7 months of anger, betrayal, and silence. But hearing it now felt like being shot all over again. "She's alive?" he asked. "Yes, sir, but her condition is critical. She's asking for you." Adrian gripped the edge of the desk, knuckles white. The world, for the first time in years, felt unstable beneath him. He rose from his chair, pushing aside the reports, the gun, the glass, all meaningless now. "Is she conscious?" "Barely. She kept saying your name before losing consciousness again." His heart twisted. He had convinced himself she was gone for good, gone to another man, gone from his life, gone from his reach. Yet here she was lying on a hospital bed, whispering his name while bringing a life into the world. His life. He grabbed his coat, keys, and gun instinctively, not because he expected danger, but because danger was all he knew. The elevator ride down felt eternal. Each floor that passed brought a new storm of questions. How could this be possible? Why now? Whose child? He stopped himself. He couldn't think like that. Not yet. But the thought clawed at his chest anyway. He remembered the night of the divorce, the shouting, the shattered vase, the accusation that had torn them apart. He had believed she betrayed him. He had seen the proof, or what looked like proof. And now, the same woman he'd sworn to forget was fighting for her life. Because of him, maybe even with him. The car engine roared to life, breaking the stillness of the dawn. Rain began to fall, light but sharp, drumming against the windshield like the ticking of fate. He drove fast through the empty streets, headlights slicing through fog. Every corner he turned, every red light he ignored, felt like tearing through time itself. Memories chased him, her laughter echoing down the hall, her hands on his chest, the night she said, "You're not the monster they think you are." And then, the day she left. The silence that followed was worse than any bullet wound he'd ever taken. The nurse's words kept replaying. She gave birth before collapsing. She's asking for you. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. She shouldn't have asked for him. He didn't deserve that. He destroyed her. With doubt, with pride, with his inability to believe in love. But if this was her last wish, he'd grant it, even if it tore him apart. By the time he reached the hospital, the rain had turned to a storm. He stepped out, coat billowing, eyes cold but heart burning. Guards at the entrance froze as he entered. They knew who he was. No one in Milan didn't. The Mafia boss of the Valente syndicate didn't visit hospitals. He sent people to hospitals. But tonight, he walked through those doors like a man chasing redemption. The fluorescent lights stabbed his eyes. White walls, bleach scent, distant cries. He hated places like this. Too sterile, too honest. He strode to the front desk. "Liana Valente, room—" The nurse looked up, startled, then checked the file. "Room 317 ICU, but sir—" He was already moving. His footsteps echoed down the corridor. Steady, powerful, but trembling with emotion he'd buried deep. Each step was a confession, each breath a plea. At the elevator, he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirrored door. Tailored suit, shadowed eyes, a scar along his jaw. Powerful, controlled, dangerous. But behind that reflection, he saw something else. Fear. Real, raw fear. He clenched his jaw. "Get a grip," he muttered. But his voice shook. The elevator chimed open. A nurse rushed past, holding a newborn wrapped in pink. Adrian's gaze followed the baby, his chest constricting. He had never imagined himself as a father, never believed he could create something innocent in a life built on sin. And yet, her voice echoed in his head. "She named you as the father." The doors opened again. He stepped out, his shoes silent on the linoleum. Outside room 317, two doctors stood whispering. When they saw him, they froze. "Mr. Valente," one stammered. "She's weak." The childbirth was complicated. He barely heard them. Through the glass window, he saw her, Liana, pale, fragile, beautiful, even in ruin. Her chest rose and fell slowly, machines beeping beside her, and in her arms, a baby, tiny, perfect, with the same storm-gray eyes that stared back at him in the mirror every morning. His world tilted. He pressed a palm against the glass, breath catching. For the first time in his life, the man who had killed without hesitation felt something close to terror. Not for his life, but for what he was seeing. "Sir?" the nurse said gently. "Would you like to go in?" He couldn't move. Every instinct screamed to run, to turn away before he broke completely. But his feet carried him forward. The door opened with a soft click. The air inside felt colder, heavier. He walked slowly to the bedside, eyes fixed on her face. She looked like a memory, the kind that never fades, no matter how hard you try to erase it. "Liana," he whispered. Her eyelids fluttered. She looked at him for a heartbeat, a ghost recognizing its own haunting. And then she whispered, weak but certain, "Adrian." He froze. Hearing his name from her lips again was like breathing for the first time in years. He wanted to say so much, to ask everything, to apologize, to scream. But all that came out was a broken, Why didn't you tell me?" Her lips trembled, but she smiled faintly. "Because you wouldn't have believed me." A monitor beeped sharply. Her breathing faltered. The nurse rushed forward, adjusting wires, calling for the doctor. Adrian's heart pounded. "Liana!" She looked at him again, eyes glassy but full of something fierce. "You have to take care of her." "Her?" Her gaze flicked to the baby in her arms. Adrian's throat closed. "Liana, stay with me," he whispered, gripping her hand. She squeezed weakly, eyes flickering toward him. "She's your daughter," she breathed, "and she has your eyes." Her hand went limp. The machines wailed. Adrian froze, not moving, not breathing, just feeling. The world outside might have been burning, but all he saw was her, the woman he loved, fading before his eyes, leaving him with the proof of everything he'd lost. He stood there, broken, as doctors surrounded her. In the chaos, one truth echoed louder than the alarms. The past he buried wasn't dead. It had just been reborn. Adrian stared at the baby as the nurse gently lifted her from Liana's arms. The infant opened her eyes, gray, sharp, hauntingly familiar. And in that gaze, Adrian saw not innocence, but destiny staring back. The same destiny that had just called him. Daddy. 2. The echo of the heart monitor faded into a cruel silence. Adrian stood frozen beside the hospital bed, the sound of doctors rushing around him blurring into white noise. His world, once defined by order, power, and control, now stood shattered around a newborn's cry. The nurse gently lifted the baby from Liana's lifeless arms, and for a moment, Adrian couldn't breathe. That tiny face, those storm-gray eyes, his eyes, were like a reflection of everything he had tried to destroy within himself. His hands trembled as he reached out, hesitating as if afraid to touch her, afraid that his darkness might stain her innocence. The nurse's voice broke through softly. "She's your daughter, Mr. Valente." His throat tightened at the words, a truth too heavy for a man who'd never believed he could deserve such purity. He looked back at Liana, her stillness, her pale lips, her fragile beauty, even in death's shadow. And the guilt clawed deeper into his chest. He had wanted revenge, justice, distance. But all he felt now was regret. The woman who once called him her world had died whispering his name. Hours blurred into gray as dawn bled slowly into the sky. The storm had calmed outside, but inside him it raged fiercer than ever. Adrian sat beside her bed long after the doctors left, refusing to move, refusing to accept what he'd lost. He traced the back of her hand with a shaking thumb, whispering things he should have said when she was alive. Apologies that would never reach her ears. "You shouldn't have asked for me, Liana," he murmured, voice thick. "You should have hated me." He didn't notice the nurse enter until she spoke softly. "Mr. Valente, she's breathing." His head snapped up. The heart monitor, faint moments ago, now pulsed with weak but steady rhythm. His pulse quickened. "What did you say?" The nurse smiled, relief glinting in her eyes. "She's not gone yet." For a moment, the unshakable Mafia boss felt his knees weaken. Hope, a feeling he had long buried, flickered to life inside him. He leaned closer, watching her chest rise and fall, fragile but defiant, like the heartbeat of fate refusing to die. When Liana's eyes fluttered open, the world seemed to still. Her gaze found him, hesitant, lost, but filled with something he hadn't seen in years: recognition. She tried to speak, lips trembling, voice faint. "Adrian?" He leaned closer, gripping her hand tightly. "I'm here. Don't talk. You need to rest." But she shook her head weakly, her gaze drifting toward the crib beside her bed, where the baby slept. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "She looks like you." Liana gave a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. "No, she looks like us." A tear slipped down her cheek. "You have to know the truth, Adrian." He froze. The word truth cut deeper than any bullet ever could. He wanted to tell her there was no truth that mattered anymore, that nothing could undo what he had done. But something in her eyes stopped him. "Ask your mother," she breathed, and in that moment the color drained from his face. His stepmother, Elena Valente, the woman who raised him when his real mother died, the woman who smiled at him like a saint but whispered poison into his ears like a serpent. His chest tightened. "What about her?" he asked quietly. But Liana's strength was fading again, her eyes fluttering shut. "Ask your mother," she repeated before her body sank back into unconsciousness. The monitor steadied, but the damage was done, not to her body, but to his heart. Adrian's jaw clenched as he stared at her, memories flashing through his mind. Elena's warning looks, her subtle manipulations, her insistence that Liana was never good enough for him. He remembered the night he signed the divorce papers, Elena's voice in his head saying, "Some women love your name, not you." And like a fool, he believed her. Adrian rose slowly, pacing the room, every nerve in his body coiled with fury. The rain had stopped outside, leaving streaks of water sliding down the glass. Like tears, the sky refused to hide. His reflection stared back at him in the window, a man made of power, vengeance, and lies. He had destroyed the woman he loved because of another woman's deceit, his stepmother's. The thought ignited a fire he couldn't control. He turned toward the crib, his expression softening as he saw the baby stirring, her small fingers curling around the edge of the blanket. He knelt beside her, his voice breaking for the first time in years. "I don't know what kind of father I can be, but I swear I won't let anyone hurt you the way they hurt her." The baby shifted, her eyes blinking open, gray and hauntingly familiar. A reminder that fate had just given him a second chance, wrapped in pink. Later that night, the hospital corridors emptied into silence. Adrian stood outside the ICU window, his phone pressed to his ear. "Get me everything on Elena Valente," he ordered coldly. His second in command, Marco, hesitated. "Boss, that's your stepmother." "Then make sure you dig deeper," Adrian snapped. "I want to know what she's been hiding." His reflection in the glass was unreadable, but his eyes burned with vengeance. He had spent his entire life controlling information, yet the one truth that mattered most had been hidden from him by the woman he trusted like family. He turned back to the room, watching Liana sleep, machines keeping her alive. His daughter, barely a day old, lay in the nursery, unaware that her birth had just reignited a war that would burn through everything he thought he knew. As he stood there, a nurse approached quietly. "Mr. Valente, she's stable for now, but she'll need protection. Whoever did this, they didn't want her to survive." Adrian's gaze sharpened instantly. "What do you mean?" The nurse hesitated, glancing around nervously. She had signs of sedatives in her system. Not something we give in delivery. Someone tampered with her IV before she collapsed. His blood ran cold. Someone wanted Liana dead, and he had been blind to it all. "Check the security footage," he ordered, voice deadly calm. "Every second." When she nodded and hurried off, he turned toward the ICU once more. His heart wasn't just breaking anymore, it was turning to ice. That night, as the city lights flickered beneath the dark sky, Adrian sat in his car outside the hospital. The engine idled, but his thoughts were far from calm. Elena. Her name pulsed in his head like a curse. He remembered her embrace after Liana left, the way she had whispered, "You did the right thing, my son. She was using you." He had believed her then, but now those words dripped with poison. He clenched his fists, the leather of the steering wheel creaking under his grip. If what Liana said was true, if Elena had orchestrated their separation, then the woman he called mother had destroyed not just his marriage, but the life of an innocent woman and child. Back in the hospital, a soft cry broke the silence. Adrian turned his head, watching through the glass as the nurse gently rocked his daughter back to sleep. Something inside him cracked then. Something deeper than rage, deeper than guilt. For the first time, he realized what he truly stood to lose. Not an empire, not loyalty, but family. He stepped out of the car, walking back through the empty corridors, his footsteps echoing like a vow. He stopped at Liana's bedside once more, brushing her hair from her face. "I'll find out what she did to us," he whispered, "and when I do, I'll make her pay." His words were soft, but the promise beneath them was carved in steel. As he stood there, the faintest sound made him look up. The door creaked. A nurse entered, holding a file. "Mr. Valente, this was left at the reception for you." She handed it over with trembling hands. The envelope was sealed in black wax, elegant, old-fashioned, and signed with an initial that froze his blood, E.V. Elena Valente. He broke the seal slowly, eyes narrowing as he unfolded the note inside. Just one line. "Be careful what truths you dig for, my dear son. Some graves shouldn't be opened." Adrian's grip tightened until the paper tore in half. He looked up at Liana's motionless body, his jaw hardening, his pulse steadying into a rhythm that sounded like war drums. The game had changed. The woman he once loved had given him a reason to fight again, and the woman who raised him had just declared war. The storm outside might have stopped, but another was rising within him, darker and far more dangerous. As the monitors hummed softly in the dim light, Adrian turned toward the window and froze. Across the street, under the flickering hospital lamp, stood a figure cloaked in black, watching his room. When the light flashed again, he saw her face clearly. Elena, smiling, waiting. 3. The rain had barely dried on the streets when Adrian left the hospital. That image, Elena's shadow under the flickering street lamp, her smile faint but unmistakable, followed him like a curse through every turn of the car. It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't coincidence. She had been watching him, waiting, like a spider that senses the tremor of its web. The city blurred around him as he drove through the darkness, his mind racing with fragments of every lie he had ever believed. The wipers hissed across the windshield, each stroke slicing through layers of denial. "She's your mother," a voice inside him whispered, but another, colder one replied, "No, she's your poison." When he finally reached the Valente mansion, dawn was breaking. The kind of pale, colorless dawn that makes everything look more like a memory than reality. The gates opened silently as if they too feared him. He strode through the courtyard, his steps heavy with rage. The mansion stood tall and cold, draped in shadows and deceit. He had built empires, but this house was the cradle of his ruin. Inside, candles flickered along the hall, their flames trembling like the truth he was about to unleash. Elena waited there, seated on a velvet armchair as if she had been expecting him all along. A crystal glass of red wine shimmered in her hand, her posture regal, her smile faint and knowing. "Adrian," she greeted softly, her tone a caress. "I wondered how long it would take before you came storming home." He didn't answer. He walked closer, the air thick with tension, the scent of roses masking something rotten beneath. "I saw you," he said finally, his voice sharp as broken glass. "Outside the hospital." Elena's smile didn't falter. "I go where I'm needed, and you, my dear, are in desperate need of guidance." His jaw flexed. "You mean control?" She tilted her head, amusement glittering in her eyes. "Is that what you think I've done? Controlled you?" He took another step forward, his voice darkening. "You destroyed her. You destroyed us." Elena's expression softened, almost pitying. "I warned you about her from the beginning, Adrian. I told you. Women like Liana love your power, not your heart." He let out a hollow laugh that echoed off the marble walls. My heart? You taught me to bury it, remember? To trust no one. To see love as weakness. Her gaze sharpened. Because weakness gets you killed. I raised you to survive, Adrian. To lead. Everything I did was for you. He stepped closer until their faces were inches apart. You call this protection? You lied. You made me believe she betrayed me. Elena's eyes gleamed with something cold and triumphant. I protected you. You were blind in love, and she would have ruined you. She was my wife, he barked. She was a distraction, Elena replied smoothly, sipping her wine. She was pregnant when she met you, with another man's child. The words hit like bullets. Adrian's pulse roared in his ears. You're lying. Am I? She purred. You saw the reports, the pictures, you saw the proof yourself. He shook his head, chest heaving. I saw what you wanted me to see. For the first time, her smile faded. Be careful what you accuse me of, Adrian. You forget who gave you everything you have. He took a slow step back, eyes narrowing. No, you took everything I had. Her, my peace, my truth. Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. The candle flames flickered as a draft swept through the hall, whispering against the walls like old ghosts. Elena set her glass down with deliberate calm. Do you think she would have stayed if she knew the kind of man you are? How much blood your name carries? Her voice softened, almost tender. I kept your secret safe, my darling, even from her. He glared at her, voice low and trembling. You poisoned her mind, and mine. She rose from her chair, her silk gown flowing like liquid night. You should thank me, she said softly. Everything I've done for the Valente name. For you. Adrian stared at her, realizing that the woman before him wasn't his mother anymore. She was the architect of his ruin, and she was proud of it. He turned away, pacing toward the grand piano by the window. His reflection in the polished black surface looked unfamiliar. Eyes colder, shoulders heavier, heart fractured beyond repair. Liana said one thing before she collapsed, he murmured. She told me to ask you the truth. Elena's voice came like silk over a blade. Then perhaps she should have died before speaking. He froze, the meaning sinking in. Slowly, he turned. What did you say? She smiled faintly, unbothered. Oh, don't look at me like that. Accidents happen. A sedative here, a wrong dose there. Childbirth is dangerous. Rage erupted inside him like a storm. In 2 steps, he was in front of her, grabbing her wrist hard enough to make her drop the wine glass. It shattered between them, red spilling across the marble like blood. You tried to kill her, he hissed. She didn't flinch. I saved you. He shoved her hand away, disgust written across his face. You're not my mother. Her lips curved into a sad, knowing smile. No, Adrian, I'm the only mother you've ever had. The only one who truly understands what it means to protect this family. He turned away, shaking, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it might split. You destroyed my family to protect yours. Elena walked toward him slowly, her heels clicking like the ticking of a clock counting down to something inevitable. You'll see, my son, she whispered near his ear. One day you'll thank me. Love makes men weak, but hate makes them powerful. He pulled away, his eyes filled with something she hadn't seen in him since he was a boy. Pain. You made me into this, he said quietly. A man who doesn't know how to love without breaking everything he touches. Elena's expression flickered. For just a second, the mask slipped, revealing something almost human. Then it was gone. If you hate me for saving you, she said, so be it. But remember, I built you, and I can destroy you. He didn't answer. He just stared at her, the realization settling like frost in his veins. that every part of him had been shaped by her lies, her control, her manipulation. The monster the world feared wasn't born. He was raised. Adrian turned toward the door, his voice low but deadly. "This ends now." Elena's voice followed him, calm and certain. "Walk away if you must, but remember, I still know the truth about your father's death." He stopped. Slowly he turned back, his eyes narrowing to slits. "What did you say?" Her smile returned, sharp and cruel. "You've spent your life blaming the streets for killing him, but the truth, my dear, lies much closer to home." For a long moment silence hung between them, thick and suffocating. Adrian's pulse pounded in his ears as he stared at the woman who had stolen his past, his present, and now threatened his future. "What are you hiding, Elena?" he demanded. She only smiled, turning away to pour another glass of wine. "Go back to your little broken wife," she said sweetly. "You have bigger ghosts to chase now." He took one last look at her before leaving, the woman who had called herself his savior but had destroyed everything he loved. As he walked out of the mansion, the door slammed behind him, echoing like a gunshot. The cold air hit his face, but it didn't calm him. Every step away from her felt like walking through a fire that had no end. Outside, the first rays of dawn painted the sky pale gold, cruelly beautiful, mocking the darkness that still clung to his soul. He pulled out his phone, voice low and lethal. "Marco, watch Elena. Every move, every call. I want her world under my thumb by sunrise." Marco hesitated. "Boss, you think she's behind Liana's collapse?" Adrian's voice was a whisper of steel. "She's behind everything." He hung up and looked back at the mansion. The place that raised him, protected him, and poisoned him all at once. A memory surfaced. Liana's voice the night she left. "You trust the wrong people, Adrian." He hadn't believed her then. But now, as the wind howled through the empty courtyard, he understood what she meant. As Adrian started his car, the radio crackled suddenly. Static at first, then a soft, familiar voice. "You can't hide the truth forever, my son." His grip tightened on the steering wheel. The voice wasn't coming from the radio. It was coming from the phone lying beside him. And the call was from Elena's number. 4. The voice on the phone hissed like a ghost crawling through static. "You can't hide the truth forever, my son." Adrian's grip tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. The sound wasn't just eerie. It was familiar, calm, composed, terrifyingly maternal. It was Elena's voice, but laced with something darker. A warning, or perhaps a confession, whispered from a place between guilt and control. Then silence. The call ended on its own, no trace left. He stared at the screen, her number glowing for a second before fading to black. His chest rose and fell in ragged rhythm, fury and fear warring inside him. He didn't believe in ghosts, but something about that voice felt like one. The ghost of everything she had buried. And maybe, he thought grimly, everything he had buried too. The night air outside was sharp, slicing through his thoughts as he drove through the sleeping city. He didn't know where he was going until the roads led him there, to the place he swore he'd never return. Liana's old apartment. The building stood like a tombstone against the skyline, its windows shattered, walls blackened by smoke. It had been half burned months ago in what the police had called an accidental fire. But Adrian knew better. In his world, nothing was accidental. He stepped out of the car, the crunch of broken glass under his shoes echoing in the silence. The air smelled of soot, rust, and something cruelly nostalgic, her perfume still clinging faintly to the ruin. He pushed open the half-hinged door, its hinges crying out like something in pain. Inside, dust floated in the moonlight. Every corner of the room told a story of what used to be. The faint outline of a painting she once adored, a cracked mirror where she used to check her lipstick before their dinners, and on the floor, the charred remains of letters and photographs. Each one felt like a piece of his heart left behind to rot. His boots scuffed against paper fragments, burnt corners of envelopes with her handwriting, pieces of a life he destroyed. He crouched beside what used to be her desk, his fingers brushing over blackened wood. Something caught his eye, a glimmer of gold beneath the ash. He reached for it, pulling out a half-burned notebook, the leather cover scorched, but the lock still intact. His pulse quickened. It was her diary. Her handwriting on the first unburned page was unmistakable, graceful, looping, alive. He hesitated for a moment before opening it, afraid of what he might find, but curiosity and guilt left him no choice. The first entry was dated 8 months ago. Elena came today. He froze. His eyes darted across the page, every word cutting deeper. She said she'd kill him if I stayed. She showed me photos, told me Adrian ordered my father's death. I had no choice. His breath hitched. No, that couldn't be true. He turned the page with shaking hands. The ink had bled from the fire, but the words were still there. He doesn't know. He thinks I betrayed him. But how do I tell him that it was her all along? Adrian's chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. He hadn't ordered her father's death. He'd never even met the man. But Elena, she had access to his files, his men, his seal, his entire world. A bitter taste filled his mouth. He could see it clearly now, how every piece of his life had been staged, every betrayal manufactured. Elena had pulled the strings, feeding lies into both their hearts until love became poison. He turned another page. I keep hoping he'll see through her, but she's always been his shadow, his comfort, his curse. His vision blurred. He could almost hear Liana's voice as he read, soft but full of ache. If he ever learns the truth, I'll forgive him, but he won't forgive himself. He closed the diary, his hands trembling. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls closing in. He pressed the back of his hand to his mouth, trying to contain the wave of emotion threatening to spill. For the first time in years, Adrian Valente, the man who'd stared down bullets and betrayal, felt something he couldn't fight: regret. Not the kind that fades with time, but the kind that eats away at your soul. He stood there for a long while, letting the silence press against him like punishment. His mind replayed every argument, every cold look, every moment he doubted her. Liana's tears the night she walked out, his own pride keeping him from stopping her, all because of Elena. He picked up the diary again and noticed something else. Pages missing, torn out deliberately. He frowned, flipping through until he reached the back cover. There, hidden between the burnt leather and spine, was a small key taped in place. He peeled it off, recognizing the symbol engraved on it, the Valente crest, the same one that adorned his father's safe in the old family estate. His pulse raced. The same safe Elena always said was empty. But Liana had written about it, which meant she'd been there, which meant she'd seen something he hadn't. He stared at the key, realization dawning like dawn breaking through a storm. "What did you find, Liana?" he whispered. A sudden sound made him turn, the faint creak of a floorboard behind him. His hand went to his gun instinctively, safety off, eyes scanning the shadows. Nothing, just wind pushing through the cracked window, or maybe something else. He wasn't sure anymore. He exhaled slowly, lowering the weapon, but the unease lingered. He knew someone had been here before him. Someone had tried to destroy this diary, but hadn't finished the job. He tucked the diary inside his coat, his expression hardening. Every answer he'd been seeking was now tangled with a single name: Elena. She had lied about everything, even his father's death. And now, this key might open the last secret she'd buried. But even as his mind calculated his next move, his heart was elsewhere. With Liana, pale and fragile in that hospital bed, fighting to live in a world poisoned by his own blindness. He looked around the burnt apartment one last time, his eyes lingering on the shadows that once held laughter and love. "I'll make this right," he whispered to the ashes. "Even if it kills me." He turned to leave, but as he reached the door, something stopped him. The faint smell of smoke. Not old smoke, fresh. He turned sharply, eyes darting to the far wall. Flames licked up from the corner of the room, crawling fast over what remained of the debris. Someone had set the place on fire again. Adrian cursed under his breath and rushed toward the exit, the diary clutched tight against his chest. The hallway outside was already filling with smoke. He could hear footsteps, not his own, retreating down the stairwell. Someone had been here. Someone wanted the diary gone. He chased after the sound, but by the time he reached the street, all that remained was the echo of tires screeching into the night. A black car vanished around the corner. He stood there, drenched in sweat and fury, watching the flames consume the building behind him. The fire glowed against his reflection in the car window. A man lit by vengeance and truth. He'd been blind long enough. No more lies, no more half-truths. The war had just changed course. He looked down at the diary in his hand, the leather cover now warm from the heat of the blaze. In its ashes lay everything he needed to destroy Elena, but also everything that could destroy him. And somewhere deep down, he knew Liana's final words in that diary were more than forgiveness. They were prophecy. As the fire roared behind him, Adrian opened his car door, but froze. On the driver's seat sat an envelope sealed with red wax, bearing the Valente crest. He hadn't left it there. Slowly he picked it up, heart pounding. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No threats, no explanations. Just 6 words written in elegant handwriting he recognized instantly. The key unlocks more than truth. He looked toward the burning apartment, the reflection of the flames dancing in his gray eyes, and whispered, "What have you done, Mother?" 5. The envelope's words still echoed in Adrian's mind as he drove through the rain, the city lights warping through the windshield like streaks of broken glass. The key unlocks more than truth. What did it mean? What else could there be? Every secret Elena had buried was unraveling, but now it wasn't about the empire or the money. It was about Liana, the only woman he'd ever truly loved, the one he had destroyed with his own blindness. His knuckles tightened around the steering wheel as guilt gnawed at him. The fire, the lies, the diary, all of it led back to one name, one woman, one betrayal too deep to forgive. By the time he reached the hospital, dawn was just beginning to bleed through the clouds. The corridors were silent except for the hum of machines and the soft footsteps of nurses who didn't dare meet his eyes. They knew who he was, the Mafia boss whose name carried more fear than any weapon. But tonight, he wasn't that man. He was just a broken soul walking toward the one person who still held the power to forgive him or destroy him completely. He pushed open the door to her room quietly. The faint beeping of the monitor was the only sound. Liana lay still, her face pale, her chest rising and falling slowly, but her hand moved when he entered, as if she felt him before she saw him. Adrian sat down beside her, his movements hesitant, like a sinner stepping into a church for the first time. For a moment, he just watched her breathe. Then, his voice broke the silence. "I destroyed you because I trusted the wrong heart," he whispered. His words were heavy, trembling with a pain that no empire could erase. She didn't respond at first. Her eyes flickered open slowly, meeting his, those gray eyes she once loved, now shadowed with guilt and loss. "You trusted her over me, Adrian," she said finally, her voice soft but cold, like a blade slipping under skin. He lowered his head, his jaw trembling. "She raised me. I owed her everything. She made me believe you betrayed me. I was blind." Liana turned her face away, staring at the white wall instead of him. And your blindness cost me everything." Her voice cracked, tears pooling in the corners of her eyes. "You ruined everything we could have been, the life we could have had." He reached for her hand, but she pulled it away weakly. That rejection cut deeper than any bullet he'd ever taken. "Liana," his voice broke. "I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know what she had done." Her lips trembled. "And now," she whispered, "our daughter will grow up knowing her father tried to kill her mother." The words hit him like a shot to the chest. His breath stuttered, disbelief flooding his face. "I never—" "You did," she said softly, her gaze finally meeting his. "Your men came for me that night, Adrian. They broke into the apartment. They tried to take me away. If the neighbor hadn't called the police, I would have been gone." He froze, every muscle in his body locking. His mind raced back to that night. The reports, the fire, the orders he'd supposedly signed. His throat tightened as the realization hit. Those weren't his men. They were Elena's, acting under his name, using his signature. Every drop of blood spilled, every pain Liana endured, it had all been done in his name. He stood slowly, backing away from the bed, his hand over his mouth. She used my authority," he muttered, voice breaking. "She used me to destroy you." Liana's eyes softened for a moment, but pain still lingered there. "And you let her." He closed his eyes, the truth slicing through him like glass. "I was a fool," he said. "All my life I thought power meant control, but she controlled everything, even me." He turned away, his reflection in the window barely recognizable. My empire, my loyalty, my love, all poisoned by her. Silence fell between them. Only the steady beeping of the heart monitor filled the room. Then Liana spoke again, her tone trembling but resolute. "You can't undo what's been done, Adrian. You can't fix what's already burned." He turned to her, his expression raw. "Then let me burn with it," he said quietly. "If I can't fix it, I'll make sure the one who caused it never breathes another day." Her eyes widened, fear mixing with sorrow. "Adrian, no. Don't become her." He took a deep breath, shaking his head. "It's too late. I already am." Liana's voice cracked. "If you kill her, you'll lose whatever's left of the man I loved." He met her eyes, his voice trembling. "That man died the night you walked away." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air felt heavy, charged with everything unsaid. Then, from the hallway, a sudden sound, a shuffle of feet, a faint metallic click, broke the silence. Adrian's head snapped toward the door. His instincts sharpened instantly, the Mafia in him awakening. "Stay still," he whispered. He moved toward the door, his hand brushing his coat where his gun rested. The corridor was empty at first glance, but something felt off. The lights flickered once, then steadied. A shadow moved at the far end, too quick, too deliberate. He stepped out, eyes narrowing. The faint scent of cigarette smoke lingered in the air, his mother's brand. His blood ran cold. She was here, or at least, someone she sent. He turned back toward the room, panic setting in. "Liana, lock the door," he shouted, but before she could respond, the world split apart with the crack of a gunshot. Glass shattered. The heart monitor screamed. Nurses screamed. Adrian burst into the room, gun drawn, scanning for the shooter, but all he saw was Liana gasping, her hand clutching her chest as blood bloomed through the sheets. "No!" He rushed to her side, pressing his hand over the wound, his breath ragged. "Stay with me, please." His voice trembled as he yelled for help. But the hallway was chaos, people running, alarms blaring. The shooter was gone. Liana's eyes fluttered, her hand reaching weakly for his. "She won't stop," she whispered, "until you're alone, like she was." "Don't talk like that," he begged, his voice breaking. "You're not going anywhere." Her grip tightened, her lips forming the faintest of smiles through the pain. You can't fight the truth, Adrian. It always finds a way to kill love. Her hand went limp. The monitor flatlined. He froze, his breath caught somewhere between a scream and silence. The door burst open as doctors rushed in, but he couldn't move. His world, what little of it was left, had finally collapsed. He stood there, blood on his hands, eyes burning, the echoes of that gunshot still ringing in his ears. And from the end of the corridor, unseen by anyone, a woman in black watched through the glass. Elena, her lips curling into a cold smile as she whispered, "Now, my son, you'll understand what it means to lose everything you love." Adrian looked up just in time to see her shadow disappear into the stairwell, her laughter trailing like a ghost. His vision blurred with rage as he whispered her name under his breath, his voice low and lethal. Elena. The next time he saw her, he vowed, would be the last. 6. The sirens had barely faded when the world around Adrian erupted into chaos once more. The metallic taste of blood still lingered in his mouth as he stood in the hallway, staring at the closed door of the room where Liana's body lay motionless. The air smelled of gunpowder, antiseptic, and grief. He could still hear her last words echoing in his head. "You can't fight the truth, Adrian. It always finds a way to kill love." But he wasn't ready to let that truth be the end. Not yet. Before he could even move, the elevator doors at the end of the hall slid open. A flood of men in black suits poured out, guns drawn, eyes cold and mechanical. Elena's insignia glinted on their lapels. They weren't here for rescue. They were here to erase the last pieces of her crime. Adrian's heart clenched as he realized what that meant. Liana's body, her diary, the hospital records. Every trace of the truth would be burned away, just like before. He didn't think. He acted. With the speed of a man who had lived half his life dodging bullets, Adrian dove behind the nurse's station, yanking his pistol from his holster. Bullets tore through walls and shattered glass, sending shards raining like knives. He fired back, each shot precise. Ruthless. Years of loyalty to his so-called mother had trained him for this, but tonight, every bullet carried betrayal instead of obedience. "Protect the room!" he shouted to the terrified staff. "No one touches her!" The nurses scrambled away, ducking behind stretchers. Adrian rolled across the floor, taking down 2 of Elena's men before they even reached the door. The smell of burning gunpowder filled the air, the floor slick with blood. Then he saw it. A small figure moving behind the men, carrying something wrapped in white. His heart froze. The baby, his daughter. One of Elena's men had taken her from the room amidst the chaos. "No!" Adrian roared, firing at the man's legs. The kidnapper stumbled, the bundle slipping from his arms. Adrian dashed forward, sliding across the tiles to catch the baby just before she hit the floor. He cradled her to his chest, his hand shaking. She was crying. Terrified, innocent, unaware of the war around her. He pressed his lips to her forehead. "I've got you," he whispered. "I'll never let anyone hurt you." More men flooded in. The hospital lights flickered as someone hit the generator. Shadows danced over the walls. Adrian grabbed a metal bed and flipped it over, creating a barricade. He crouched behind it, holding the crying baby close, his other hand gripping the gun tight. Every second felt like eternity. Gunfire echoing through every corridor, screams mixing with the thunder outside. Smoke filled the hallway as fire alarms blared. He could barely see now, only silhouettes moving in the haze. He fired toward them, each shot more desperate than the last. The scent of burning wires choked the air, making his eyes water. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the shooting stopped. Silence fell, thick and eerie. He could hear only the faint beeping of broken machines and the soft sobs of his daughter against his chest. He rose slowly, scanning the room. Bodies of Elena's men lay scattered like discarded chess pieces. The game over, but not won. Through the smoke, he saw her, Elena. Standing at the far end of the hallway, her posture calm, composed, elegant even amidst carnage. She wore black, like mourning, but her face showed no grief, only satisfaction. In her right hand, a pistol gleamed under the flickering lights. Adrian froze. His chest heaved, blood dripping from a wound near his shoulder, his shirt soaked. "You came yourself?" he rasped, his voice hollow. She tilted her head slightly, eyes softening in mock affection. "Of course I did, darling. A mother always comes for her child." He let out a bitter laugh. "Don't call yourself that." She stepped closer, heels echoing sharply against the blood-slick floor. "You're my son, Adrian. You were mine long before she ever came into your life." Her voice was almost tender, but every word was poison. "I built you. I shaped you. Without me, you're nothing." His jaw clenched, his voice breaking. "You didn't build me. You broke me." For the first time, her smirk faltered. "Is that what you think? That I'm your enemy?" she said softly. "Everything I did was to protect you. That woman was my life," he snapped, his voice raw. "You took her from me. You made me destroy her. You turned me into you." Elena's expression hardened. "You were always meant to be me. Power demands blood. You just never had the strength to see it." He raised his gun slowly, his hand trembling. "Strength isn't killing the people who love you." Her gaze darkened, but her tone remained cold. "Then finish what I started," she said. "Prove you're stronger than your heart." For a moment, the world went still. The rain outside slammed against the windows. The thunder rolled low like a drumbeat. They stood there, mother and son, predator and prey, love and hatred twisted into one. Tears streaked Adrian's face, cutting through the soot and blood. "You're not my mother," he whispered. "You never were." Her finger tightened on the trigger. "Then I suppose," she murmured, "you're just another enemy." They fired at the same time. The blast echoed through the ruined corridor, louder than the thunder outside. The recoil sent Adrian staggering back, his body trembling. Smoke curled between them as silence swallowed everything. For a moment, neither moved. Then Elena staggered forward, her pistol clattering to the floor. A red bloom spread across her chest. She looked down at it, then up at him. Not with anger, but with something that almost resembled pride. "You finally learned," she whispered, her knees giving way. She sank to the floor slowly, her breath shallow. "You finally chose power." Adrian lowered his gun, eyes burning. "No," he said, voice trembling. "I chose freedom." Her eyes flickered, her lips curving faintly. "Freedom feels just like death." And with that, she exhaled her last breath. For a long moment, Adrian just stood there, the storm outside reflecting the storm within. He looked down at the lifeless body of the woman who had raised him, who had taught him to kill, to survive, to rule, and realized that every part of him that belonged to her had died with that bullet. The hospital lights flickered once more, the smell of smoke thickening. He turned, clutching his daughter to his chest, walking past the bodies and the broken glass. Behind him, the building burned, flames devouring every trace of Elena's reign, every secret, every lie. But as he stepped outside, rain soaking his blood-stained shirt, he couldn't shake one thought. If Elena had a plan for everything, then maybe this too was part of it. Because somewhere in the distance, amidst the chaos of sirens and smoke, he saw a figure watching him from a car. Someone holding a phone, recording him. And as headlights flashed over the wet asphalt, he heard a faint, distorted voice from a speaker. Elena's voice, pre-recorded, taunting from beyond the grave. "You can kill me, Adrian, but you can never kill what I've made you become." Adrian froze in the rain, staring at the car speeding away, his daughter's cries echoing in his arms. His blood ran cold as he realized the war wasn't over. Elena's death had just opened another door, and someone else had already stepped through it. The rain hadn't stopped since that night. It poured for days, washing the city in gray, as if the heavens themselves were mourning the sins that had finally surfaced. Adrian stood beneath a broken umbrella at the edge of the graveyard, his coat heavy with water and silence. The mud sucked at his boots as he stared at the freshly turned earth before him. Elena's grave. No flowers, no mourners, no name carved in stone, only a metal plate that read, Elena Voss, 1969 to 2025. The world would remember her as a businesswoman, a visionary, maybe even a philanthropist. But he knew better. He knew she was the architect of every scar carved into his soul. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the tombstones in ghostly flashes. The baby in the car seat behind him stirred softly, her small cry lost in the rumble of thunder. Adrian turned back, his chest tightening. She was all that mattered now. The last fragment of Liana's light and Elena's darkness entwined in one tiny heartbeat. He brushed a hand through his wet hair, his reflection barely visible in the puddle at his feet. He saw not himself, but fragments of two people, his mother's cruelty and Liana's compassion, colliding within him. He knelt by the grave, his fingers tracing the cold earth. "You said I could never kill what you made me," he murmured, voice low and bitter. "But I did. I killed the monster, and she died with you." For a moment he felt something close to peace. But peace, like everything else in his life, came with a price. That's when his phone buzzed, an encrypted message from an untraceable number. He frowned, unlocking it. One line appeared on the screen. "Check the safe. The truth doesn't stay buried." His pulse spiked. That safe had been sealed for years, locked by Elena herself, one only he had access to after her death. He didn't hesitate. Within an hour, he was standing in the study of her mansion, the same house that had been both his home and his prison. The air was thick with dust and old perfume, the scent of a ghost that refused to leave. The portraits on the walls seemed to watch him as he moved. Elena's eyes, forever calculating, forever near. He walked to the large painting of her and pressed the hidden latch behind the frame. The painting slid aside, revealing the black steel door of the safe. His fingers trembled as he entered the code, 611, her birthday. The door clicked open. Inside was nothing but a small velvet box and a sealed envelope, yellowed slightly around the edges, his name written in her elegant cursive. Adrian. He stared at it, reluctant to touch it, afraid of the ghosts that might rise from within. But curiosity and pain were stronger than fear. He tore it open. "My dear boy, I ruined you because I couldn't bear losing you to another woman. I killed your father for the same reason. I destroyed her so you'd need me forever. But love made you stronger than hate. I envy her. She gave you what I never could. Goodbye, my son." The words blurred as tears filled his eyes. He sank to his knees, the letter trembling in his blood-stained hands. His breath came shallow. His chest tight as the storm outside howled louder. Every sentence was a blade slicing through the years of confusion, cutting open wounds he thought had already scarred over. He had hated her for her cruelty, but he had never imagined her madness had been born from love, twisted beyond recognition. He looked around the room. The grand chandelier, the marble floors, the furniture untouched since her death. And suddenly, it all felt hollow. Every luxury was a monument to her emptiness. "You wanted me to need you," he whispered, "and I did, until she came." He rose, walking to the crib where his daughter slept peacefully, unaware of the world she'd been born into. The moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow over her tiny face. She looked like Liana, the same nose, the same serene calm. Adrian's throat tightened as he crouched beside her, brushing a finger over her cheek. "You'll never grow up like I did," he whispered, voice trembling. "You'll grow up with love, not fear." But even as he said it, something deep inside him stirred. A whisper of doubt, an echo of Elena's voice. Freedom feels just like death. He shook it off, forcing the memory away. Yet the thought lingered like a stain that refused to fade. Was he truly free, or had she orchestrated even this? He stood, pacing across the room, unable to shake the unease crawling beneath his skin. The safe door creaked slightly, as if protesting being open. Then he noticed something he hadn't before. A faint glimmer at the bottom corner. A false compartment. His breath hitched. He crouched and pressed his thumb against the edge. It popped open with a soft, metallic click. Inside lay an old photo. Him as a child, maybe 10 years old, sitting beside Elena on a park bench. But behind them, blurred in the background, was another man. The same man he'd seen once in a forgotten newspaper article. His biological father. His pulse raced. On the back of the photo, a line was written in Elena's hand. "The day I chose to keep you mine." He dropped the photo, his stomach twisting. "You killed him," he muttered, realization slicing through him like lightning. She hadn't lied in her letter. She had truly murdered his father, all because she couldn't bear sharing his love. He stumbled back, clutching his head. Memories flooded in. Elena's possessive touch on his shoulder, her controlling words, the way she'd always pushed away anyone who tried to get close to him. All of it now made sense. She had destroyed his world piece by piece until she was the only one left in it. He felt sick. Betrayal had become his inheritance. He looked at his daughter again, her tiny fingers twitching as she dreamed. She was innocence reborn, untouched by Elena's poison, but also the most vulnerable piece of his heart. And now that Elena was gone, he feared what her absence might awaken in others. Power leaves a vacuum, and power like hers never died quietly. He closed the safe and turned off the lights, preparing to leave. But as he reached the door, he heard something. A soft creak, like footsteps upstairs. He froze. The mansion had been sealed since Elena's death. His hand instinctively went to his gun. The sound came again, faint, deliberate. He moved silently, every sense sharpened. The hallway stretched before him, dim and endless. He reached the staircase and glanced up. A shadow shifted at the top landing, human, slow, almost cautious. His heart pounded as he raised his weapon. "Who's there?" he called out. No response, only the whisper of rain against the windows. He took a step forward and the floorboard creaked under his boot. The shadow moved again, and then vanished. He rushed up, scanning each room, every door flung open, every corner checked. Nothing. Only the faint scent of Liana's perfume, lavender and smoke, drifting through the air. His breath caught. That wasn't possible. He followed the scent to the nursery. The window was open, curtains swaying in the cold wind, and standing there, in the doorway, was a figure he hadn't seen since that night. Pale, quiet, eyes glistening with something between sorrow and peace. Liana. Adrian froze, unable to breathe. For a moment he thought his mind had broken completely, conjuring her out of grief. But then she spoke, her voice soft yet piercing through the silence. "Then let her mother have peace too, Adrian." The suitcase in her hand slipped slightly, the faint thud echoing through the room. The words hit him harder than any bullet could. He wanted to speak, to run to her, to touch her, but his body wouldn't move. She was alive. Or maybe this was punishment, a hallucination sent by the ghost of his sins. The baby stirred again, crying softly as if sensing her mother's presence. Liana stepped closer, her eyes wet but calm, her gaze fixed on the crib. "She's beautiful," she whispered, "just like we dreamed." Adrian's throat closed up. "Liana, how?" He managed to breathe out, but she only smiled faintly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Sometimes," she said softly, "love survives what death cannot." Before Adrian could reach her, thunder cracked so loudly it shook the windows. The lights flickered, and when they came back on, the doorway was empty. Only the faint smell of lavender lingered in the air, and the crib was rocking gently, as if touched by unseen hands. Adrian's heart raced as he turned toward the window and saw footprints in the rain leading away from the mansion, vanishing into the storm. The rain had softened to a drizzle by the time Adrian reached the garden. The world outside washed in gray and silver. His heart pounded as he followed the fading footprints through the mud, small, delicate prints that led toward the iron gates of the old estate. The air was cold, sharp against his lungs, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Not when he knew that the impossible had just happened. Liana was alive. Somehow, after all the chaos, the death, the destruction, she was standing again, somewhere between memory and miracle. The storm around him had quieted, but inside him, another one raged with desperate hope. When he saw her near the gate, her silhouette framed by the flickering headlights of a car waiting beyond, he felt something deep inside him break. She was drenched, her hair clinging to her face, her suitcase heavy at her side, but it wasn't her exhaustion that hurt him. It was the way she looked at him, as if she'd already said goodbye 1,000 times before he arrived. "Liana," he called, his voice hoarse from the cold and from everything he'd never said. She stopped, turning slowly, eyes glimmering with tears. For a moment, neither spoke. The space between them was filled only by the soft patter of rain and the distant hum of the city that had taken so much from them both. He stepped forward, closing the distance inch by inch. His hand trembled as he reached for hers. She hesitated, her fingers twitching before he finally caught her hand in his. The warmth of her skin against his felt unreal, fragile, almost like touching light. "Don't walk away again," he pleaded, his voice breaking into raw honesty. "Not because of what she did." Liana's lips parted, her breath catching as if those words reopened every wound she had spent years trying to heal. She shook her head slowly, tears spilling freely now. "I'm not leaving because of her, Adrian," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm leaving because every time I look at you, I see pain. I see the ghosts of what we lost, the shadows of what she made us become." Her gaze fell, her words heavy with sorrow. "And I don't know if love can survive that." Adrian's throat tightened. He took a shaky step closer, cupping her face gently in his blood-stained hands, his touch trembling like the storm itself. "Then let me turn it into peace," he said softly, his voice cracking. "I can't change what I believed, Liana. I can't erase the things I did. But I can love you better than I ever did. I can choose you this time. Not fear, not loyalty, not revenge. Just you." Liana's breath hitched as she stared up into his eyes. She saw it. The man she had once fallen for, but stripped of the armor he had once worn so fiercely. No longer the assassin trained to obey, no longer the son molded by manipulation and lies. Just Adrian, broken, human, trembling under the weight of everything he'd done, yet still standing before her with his heart bared completely. Lightning flashed across the clouds, illuminating the tears glistening on both their faces. For a heartbeat, the world fell silent. Their daughter, cradled in Liana's arms, stirred softly, her tiny hand escaping the blanket. She reached out, her small fingers brushing against Adrian's hand. That touch, so simple, so pure, bridged the distance between them more completely than any words could. Adrian let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding, his fingers gently intertwined with both Liana's and their daughters, forming a fragile connection of warmth amidst the cold. The fire that had once destroyed their lives had left only ashes behind, But somehow, from those ashes, something new had begun to breathe again. Something soft, fragile, and painfully beautiful. Liana's eyes softened, her defenses slowly crumbling as she watched him. "You always said love was weakness," she murmured, her voice breaking. Adrian smiled faintly, the kind of smile that comes only from deep regret. "I was wrong," he said. "Love is the only thing that ever made me strong enough to fight her." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she closed her eyes, leaning her forehead against his. "She tried to make you her reflection," she whispered, "but she failed." Adrian swallowed hard, his hand pressing over hers. "Because you showed me who I could be without her," he said softly. "You gave me something she never could, a reason to live for someone else." The rain fell harder again, but neither of them moved. They stood there, wrapped in silence, holding the only things that still mattered. Around them, the night seemed to sigh, as though even the wind was tired of fighting. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. Liana finally spoke, her tone quieter now, more fragile. "When I thought you were gone," she whispered, "I told myself I would never forgive you. But when I saw you holding her, I knew I already had." Adrian blinked back tears, his heart twisting painfully. "You shouldn't have," he said. "I don't deserve it." She shook her head gently. "Maybe not, but forgiveness isn't about who deserves it. It's about who needs it most." He smiled through the ache. "Then maybe we both do." A soft laugh broke through her tears, the first sound of light he had heard from her in what felt like forever. It wasn't the laughter of the woman she used to be, but of someone reborn from everything she had endured. They stood there, drenched, broken, but somehow whole. Two souls stitched back together not by perfection, but by the understanding of pain. The war that had consumed them both had ended, not in victory or defeat, but in the quiet surrender of love that refused to die. Liana brushed her thumb across his cheek, wiping away the rain and tears mixed together. "She'll never know what we went through," she said, glancing down at their daughter. "And that's how it should be." Adrian nodded, his voice low. "She'll grow up in a world without lies, without the weight of our sins." Liana smiled faintly, her eyes filled with a quiet, weary hope. "Then we start over," she said softly. "Not for us, for her." He nodded, pressing his forehead to hers. "For her," he whispered. Thunder rolled once more, but it no longer sounded like war. It sounded like a heartbeat. The city lights in the distance shimmered through the fog, reflecting off the wet pavement like scattered stars. Liana reached up, her hand resting over his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath her palm. "Still beating," she murmured. He smiled faintly. "Because of you." She leaned into him and he kissed her. Not like the desperate fire they once shared, but like a promise reborn. The kiss was slow, tender, healing. It carried everything they had lost and everything they still had left to fight for. When they finally broke apart, their daughter let out a small sound, half cry, half giggle, as if blessing their broken reunion. Adrian looked down at her, smiling through his tears. "She's got your spirit," he said softly. Liana chuckled weakly, brushing her fingers through the baby's dark hair. "And your stubbornness," she teased. He grinned faintly. "God help her then." The tension that had bound them for so long began to fade with the dawn. The first rays of morning began to break through the clouds, painting the horizon in soft hues of gold and rose. The rain stopped. The air was still. The storm, both outside and within, had finally passed. Adrian wrapped an arm around Liana's shoulders, guiding her gently back toward the house. Behind them, the mansion stood in ruins, but within its broken walls, something new was being born, something no fire, no betrayal, no death could destroy. As they stepped inside, he turned once more toward the window, watching the smoke rise slowly from the distant ashes of the old world they had burned. Elena's voice no longer haunted him. The whispers were gone. For the first time in his life, the silence felt peaceful. Liana placed her hand over his. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. He looked down at her, then at their daughter. "That maybe," he said, "some love isn't meant to be perfect. It's meant to survive." Liana smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "Then ours lived through fire." He nodded. "And it's still burning." She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder as the baby drifted back to sleep in her arms. The light of morning spilled across them, warm and golden. The air smelled of rain and renewal. For the first time in years, Adrian allowed himself to breathe, deeply, freely. He wasn't the son of a monster anymore. He wasn't a weapon. He wasn't a man haunted by what he had lost. He was a father, a lover, a man who had finally found redemption not through revenge, but through love that refused to die. Outside, the birds began to sing, their song faint but real, a song of survival, of dawn after the storm. Adrian held Liana and their daughter close as sunlight spilled through the window, burning away the shadows that had ruled his life for too long. The war had ended, not in blood, but in the quiet victory of a heart reborn. Love had lived through fire, and this time it would never burn again. He built his empire on trust until the woman he trusted most tore it apart. But in the ruins, he found something stronger than blood: love. Subscribe to Heart-Woven Tales, where betrayal meets redemption and love always finds its way home.